All right, we'll start. We'll record this session again. So, all right. I'm already one up from this morning, so I handed out the assignment sheet. This morning class, I forgot all about doing that. So, it was a morning. We'll go there. All right, so many of you already submitted the wireless lab with the, going into the router, but that's due at the end of the class today. Let's see here, and then as we were talking just a little bit ago, the lab wireless radius lab will be new next week, but I'll go over that during our lab time this evening. So kind of go over that and give an overview of Packet Tracer for those of you that are new to it. And let's see here. Other than that, I think let's make sure you're doing the video project, right? That's still going. Yeah. But yeah, so there are 3 submissions for the video project, right? 1 in 2 weeks is just the outline and intro paragraph or whatever. Then a week from that is the rough draft, at least 3 pages, and then after spring break we'll come back, and then that's when the final 6-page is due. So, but there's 3 submissions. I just want to. First submission 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, it's the 23rd, right? So it's technically just under 2 weeks from today, but so February 23rd is Sunday, right? Is when it's due. But it's just an outline and an intro paragraph, right? So you don't have to go too overboard on that. And yeah, just an intro paragraph, not an intro, page, 2 pages, right? I had some students in the morning class asking about that, and it's like, I forgot 2 pages. It's like, no, that's too much. That's not an intro. That's a paper. Yeah. Right. Well, I know. Right. Well, that's my fear, though, is this video is so long. I mean, you could write a book, right? So please just pick a few topics, narrow it down. Right. So I don't want it to be too hard, but I want you to get something out of the video, and then just kind of confirm to me that you watched the video and reinforce some good ideas. Right. All right. So I got some good feedback this morning, though. The morning class kind of liked what we did on Monday. What's your feedback on the slides? To be honest.
It's going to help a little bit more if going in depth.
Yeah.
Like since I have RFID, I want them to actually
right.
went a little bit more memorized.
Right. That kind of they kind of said that they said it made the presentation go quicker. So I was like, okay, well that's fair, because you're more active and more involved. All right. So I guess we may try that more often. Unfortunately, what's left on the slides, there's not there's not that many people here. We could probably do it, but but if everybody were here, there's not enough slides left to make it equitable and fair that everybody got one. But it's a good Monday type style of dealing with the slides, and I like that idea. That way, if we run out of time, we can make it up on Wednesday. But so I thought it went okay. I just didn't, it was different for sure. But I'm glad to get your feedback. So, all right. So what we'll do is we'll at least wrap up this chapter. There's not much left. We did get through a good part of it. The second half, even though it's about the same amount of slides left, it's a lot of pictures and or tables and things, right? So let's see here. Where is? Okay, I think that is where we left off. Any questions before I get started, though, or anything about Monday or about this chapter, or any Any issues? No? All right. Okay. All right. So, as was mentioned a little bit on Monday, the 802.11, right, has different MAC sublayers, right? They deal with the layer 2 differently than wired, right? And we have some different control frames and data frames that we send between our radios and clients and stations that is different than on a wired. And so here's just a representation of the difference, right? You've got the 802.11 data frame on top, and then your regular Ethernet frame on the bottom. And so you'll see that we have 4 addresses, MAC addresses in the wireless, right? Whereas we really only have a destination and source in the wired, right? And so the reason for that, I believe, did we talk about that? Yeah. So you have, with the wireless, you have the source, the transmitting address, the receiving address, and the destination address. So it makes sure that it knows who's transmitting and who's receiving, not just who's the source of the message and who's receiving the end message, right? Because in a wireless, it may be ad hoc, or we may be repeating over and over, right? So those transmit receivers may change, but the source destination would stay the same. So that's one of the major differences, right? So you see that the MAC header is significantly larger because it's got those 2 extra addresses in it. But otherwise, they're relatively the same. All right. So one of the things that wireless has done is we have this multi-input, multi-output, and then even multi-user, multi-input, multi-output. So multi-input, multi-output allows the signals from one or more receivers to be sent. So like most home access points will have 2 antennae on it, right? So it has that multi-access, multi-input and output capabilities. So it increases our network throughput, it increases our range to have these multiple multiple inputs and outputs for one device, right? And then we extend it further on some of our commercial grade, right, where you can even have multi-users with multiple antennas and that can service our multiple clients simultaneously. So it's just mind-boggling what they've come up with and how they extended our little bandwidth that we have and be able to squeeze and eke out more throughput, right? Because I mean, when
the processors that we have.
Well, right, the process, everything, right? It's just everything gets better. Right, if we get more, right? Because I mean, when I did my wireless ISP, 2 megs was like the top speed. You know, that was the throughput, right? You know, now they're getting gigabit speeds of apparently in the same spectrum, right? And that's just mind-boggling to me, right? And then so we can channel bond or take 2 adjacent 20 megahertz channels and make them a 40 megahertz channel, thus doubling the bandwidth, right? Or we can do frame aggregations, and that's combining multiple frames into one larger frame, right? And there's 2 techniques for doing this, right? The MAC service data unit, or MSDU, and the MAC protocol data unit, or the MPDU. And it's just 2 different methods of combining smaller frames into one larger frame, so it reduces our overhead if we only have a single frame. All right, and then this slide just makes it the differences, right? Like I was saying, you got 802.11n, which is an older technology, right? The frame rates were those 7,935, and then or 65,535, versus now with our AC, right, we've got the 11,000 bytes and then the 4.7 million bytes on the other end. I mean, that is an incredible amount of data difference, right? 65,000 bytes versus 4.69 million bytes. I mean, that's a huge drastic increase from N to AC, right? So, I mean, to be able to push through that much difference of data in one single frame at one time, right? That's, yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And then here's the differences between a MSDU and MPDU, because I knew you were just chomping at the bit, like, what's the difference, right? And they both have, three payloads, but the MPDU has subheaders and file checks, or some checks after each payload, whereas just the MSDU has all three payloads and one file check, right? All right. All right, so we definitely don't set up our wireless networks the same as we do our wired networks, right? Because, well, we don't have wires, so we have a little more flexibility on how we put things together. But we have three main tech topologies that we use in wireless. Ad hoc you don't see all too often, but that's just basically device. There's no central access point or server or anything, right? It's just every device talks to each other. The infrastructure, which is the most common used, where we have that central access point, and it accepts the wireless signals for all the clients, right? So if you wanted to, talk to one computer over the other in the room, it would go through the access point. Whereas in an ad hoc, you would just go directly to whatever computer you wanted to talk to. And then mesh is where we just get bigger networks, and you have access points that are peer devices, creating larger networks, right? And here's the ad hoc, right? Any of these three devices can talk to any other device directly. There's no access point in between them, right? Versus the infrastructure mode, we have an access point, and so if the laptop wants to talk to the printer, it goes to the access point and then to the printer, right? And it doesn't go straight to the printer. And then in a mesh, we just have multiple access points, and so we have larger networks that can be combined. And then we have certain management protocols, and so Cisco makes a lightweight access point protocol, or a control and provisioning of wireless access points, right? So these help in centralizing our authentication, definitely load balancing, right, between access points. Channel management, right? So we talked that wireless devices work on certain channels, right? And so this protocol would help you manage and maintain which access points were on what channel, so you didn't overlap or interfere with each other. And detection of rogue access points, which is a security issue, right? If somebody were to put up their own access point on your network and try to fool your users into connecting to them. So that is an evil twin, and we'll be getting into that shortly. Yeah, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And so here's just a large network here. This is your typical home, right? Small office setup, right? You just have a small home office router. It's a purpose device, and then, you know, most of us probably have one at home, right? But when we're installing our access points for organizations, right, and even at home, I mean, you definitely want to figure about the distance where you're going to locate the device to get the best coverage, although most of the time we're stuck with wherever the cable or phone company put the put the entry point, right? Because, you know, they don't care, because then you can buy a range extender, right? But normally, right, if we're planning it out, we want to plan out the distance, where we want to put the location, what kind of obstacles, you know, determine that coverage area, interference, and we may need to use some site surveys software, right, and determine the optimal place to put our wireless access points, right? And then this lists many, just some of the top things that you should think about. There's many more when you're doing a large scale out wireless. You know, say if you were going to do just even this building, it would take a lot of planning and thought about where you're going to put your access points. You know, where you have access to power, where you have access, you know, easily for data, and then if you place it, you know, in the ceiling here versus, you know, in the next room, you know, which rooms would you have coverage, right? And then will the coverage bleed through the floors, right? And you have to worry about that, and, you know, offsetting, you know, access points or whatever, upstairs, downstairs, right? What channels are you using upstairs versus downstairs? And then, right, if we're hopefully you're kind to your users and you're creating the extended, right, the ESS SID, right, where you know, you can go room to room and not have to log in, right, and you can go from access point to access point because they're on the same ESS ID. All right, and then this is just saying that there's many settings we have to set in an access point, right? You've got your SSID, the admin password. Will you broadcast the SSID or not, right? Other security options, whether you're using DHCP or not, although most of the time, you know, if, in a wireless situation, you're using DHCP because it's not easy to make your users use a static IP and try to determine that. So usually DHCP is on, but it doesn't have to be provided by the access point, right? Not necessarily. And then, of course, depending on what kind of client you have will depend on what settings and what options and how you have to set them up. And then you have some onboarding and offboarding choices, you know, especially in the commercial realm, right? Because you can have it that they have to have certain applications like antivirus installed, or they don't get full access, right? You quarantine them, right, until they have up-to-date virus scanners, or some other utility, right? Maybe a VPN client, or, you know, there's all kinds of things that you can require that it'll check off. And until then, they're quarantined. And then just as onboarding, you can have an offboarding that removes the programs or special permissions that they needed. And then it's just saying by default, we had no security on 802.11, right? It's been bolted on like pretty much everything else we do with security. So the SSID was the only item required, right? You don't have to have security, right? You can, you know, I mean, I don't know of anybody that runs wireless anymore that doesn't enable some sort of security, but technically you don't have to have security, right? Then you could require authentication. You could do MAC filtering. which is nice and is very secure, but it's really hard to maintain, right? Unless you have a real absolute control of what devices are going to be connecting, and it's a limited amount of devices, or at least it's not going to change frequently, then MAC address filtering is a good option to enable. But if you're, anybody can bring in a device, it's an awful solution because you'll be spending all your days entering MAC addresses into the access point. And then, of course, use of encryption, which, I'm glad that we don't even talk about WEP anymore. We start with WPA, which, of course, it's been replaced with WPA2, which is stronger encryptions. And so most wireless is going to use WPA2 or WPA2 Enterprise, which is our lab. We enable radius solution where it actually goes and authenticates to a server. And if you're in the list on the server, you don't get access onto the network. So that's an even more secure solution. Right, and this is just talking about that, creating a separate guest network to set up a captive portal so they can, they see a browser when connecting to the guest network, and they have to agree to terms and conditions before proceeding further, which is standard for most hotspots or anything like that today, right? They call it a security solution, but it's really just more of a legal solution. Try not to get sued. This is at best efforts, right? And then we got some pretty old terms here. Wardriving, right? Driving around trying to find unprotected wireless networks. Back years ago, this was something that would be fruitful because for example, I had my school district. We put up our data center, and it was just off of campus at the University of Illinois, and there was a lot of student housing. And well, we would get new laptops and we'd be setting them up, and it'd just be tons and tons of completely open Wi-Fi because nobody secured it back then, right? I mean, this is like 2001, right? I mean, it was fairly new. People were getting them, but they had no idea what they were doing with them, and it was completely open, and you would just laugh at how open everything was. It's like, you have no idea. But so this Wardriving was a thing, and then of course when they found it, they would have chalk markings, marking where they found an open access point, which of course the U of I campus was just littered with chalk draw. I mean, it was just basically open. I mean, it's not even worth it because it was just, everything was open. And then an evil twin, right, is somebody puts that rogue, like you were talking, put in a rogue access point in an area posing as an authorized access point. Anybody know about the Wi-Fi pineapple? That one, yeah. So here, I'll pull this up. If this doesn't give you nightmares, I mean, not too much will. So we'll go here. This is a Wi-Fi pineapple. This is the more expensive model, 200. But we'll just go down because I don't want to spend that. So for $100, I can get this little guy right here with 2 antennas, and he can act like any access point, and it's got all kinds of nifty tools, so it can act like Starbucks or a hotel or whatever, and you wouldn't know that you weren't logging into Starbucks or the hotel, and it's $100, right? And so don't do anything on any hotspot ever unless you got your own VPN set up and it's encrypted and tunneled, because you have no guarantee that you're actually connecting to the hotspot. Even the one here, you wouldn't. Although I mean, you go to a lot of effort to make it that junky, but you know. I'm sorry. I hate our Wi-Fi. It's not worth using. So, yeah. Yay for unlimited data. I just turned my Wi-Fi off here. But yeah, $100 and yeah, and it's got all kinds of tools, and yeah, it's super scary. Yeah, but it's been out for years and years, and you know, I mean, you know, prices stay the same. Well, it used to be $100 for this one. So the price went up, I guess. But yeah, the evil twin, you really have no idea. So don't do anything important over a hotspot ever. Or well, that right, a public Wi-Fi, right? Yeah, you have no idea if you're actually connecting to who you think you're connected to. All right, and so then a WPA attack, right, is just trying to crack the keys or intercept the encryption keys between access points, and so it's called WPA attack. WPS attack is trying to crack the PIN in order to access the access points settings, right? And it's just a brute force attack because as far as I know, most access points don't lock you out. So you can just continually guess, right? And eventually you can guess the right access, right? And many people leave it as the default, so that's the worst thing. Let's see here. And then if you want to troubleshoot, right, we need new tools because the wired tools don't work on wireless, right? There's no way to plug them into the waves, right? So we've got our spectrum analyzer and wireless analyzers, right, that'll help us identify access point stations, channels, help identify measuring the strength of the signals, right? I mean, these are great tools. And just like our wired friends, they range in cost, to some free to, ouch, that broke the bank. But you do get what you pay for it in certain cases too. So, and right, so we can help with signal loss, noise, interpret signal strength, ensure proper association and reassociation, capture and interpret traffic, measure the throughput, analyze characteristics of each channel, and there's just a wealth of information you can do with these testing tools. And here's just some things not to do, right? I won't read them off, but there's some of them, right? Interference, that one you just kind of have to test and figure out, although you might be able to understand, hey, I don't understand why I'm not getting signal. There's this tree in front of me. Yeah. But some interference is more obvious than others. But like I think the book talked about having chicken wire in the wall, right? That's less obvious interference that you may not be aware of, right? So there's some certain stuff built in our buildings and structures, especially older buildings, that you would not fathom or think existed, but does.
Concrete rebar is like worse.
Right, concrete rebar, yeah. Right. Oh yeah, right. Well, yeah. You got doors, steel doors, things like that. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of potential interference. Motors, right? So, some big motors, they could be generating magnetic waves that that could be in theory, right? Microwave ovens, old industrial microwave ovens. I've had those happen, right? Yeah, I lose my access right around noon every day. Go over there, look at it, I'm like, what's that noise? Yeah, I go over and someone's cooking their lunch and it's right on the other side of the wall, their access point. I don't understand why you're losing it, right? Especially this was back in the 2.4 megahertz range, because the microwave ovens could be very close to that, especially the industrial ones. But yeah, and then of course your antenna choice, right? Do you stick an omni off the floor or a unidirectional off the ceiling, right, to cover a floor? And obviously in this case, the unidirectional gives a better coverage, right? In theory, right? At least according to the picture. But if you get the omni up high enough, it may it may do better, right? Because it covers the whole area, right? But you'd have to figure it out as far as the specs on each antenna, right? And the power, what kind of power you're getting out of it, and how much, is it how much gain, because this could be a DB13 and that could be a DB3, right? And so the gain is less, right? So the smaller the number, the less spread. There's too many factors. But according to the picture, we'll agree. The unidirectional in this case gives more coverage. And that is our wireless chapter 6. So, like I said, there wasn't enough really to give everybody a slide. Let's see here. So what I'm going to do is, so now next week, week 6, this is when this lab is due. So you'll find it in week 6. It's the wireless, the lab wireless radius. So I'm going to do the 64-bit. I think either will work, but just take the 64-bit, download it, and use that. But when you open it up in Packet Tracer, it'll give you directions, right? And so really, there's a lot of step-by-step directions if you go in the book, and it's project 10-1, right? It's page 604 if you have the physical book, but it's project 10.1. But technically, you can just make all these settings on these 3 devices. You have a wireless router, a server, and a laptop. And if you make all these setting changes, it'll pass. Kay, just out of, did you go by the book, or did you?
The only thing was, I think the book showed exactly how to get to the AAA setting.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. But so yeah, the book does have step by step. But so I'm just going to go. So right now it defaults onto network devices, and the 4th image is our wireless, right? So you see the little waves, right? And so then we want our WRT300N router. So you just drag it on, right? I'm not going to do the lab, but and then we need. So I go over here to end devices because we need a server and we need a laptop. So I'll put those out there. And so when you double click on one of the devices, it brings up the device. You can see the image, right? You can go to the config, right? You can configure the network card, which that's part of this lab, the wireless. You can configure the security authentication, right? IP address of the server that you're using, things like that. The laptop, one trick to it, I'm going to expand it, is it has a wired card to start. You need to actually change out the card and make it wireless. So that's a tip there, and I'll let you figure that out. And then the server, right? So you can do that, and you can configure it. And then, like she said, the book shows you under services, that's for this AAA, and that's where you got to configure the server. And then the only other thing is cables, right? This lightning bolt is your cables. And so you have all kinds of cables, but we want, just a typical straight through cable, right? And so we will plug it to whatever. You click on the router, you get a list of where you want to plug it in. And then you can plug it into the server, right? And so, and then it'll eventually go green when it's actually made a connection. And you'll know this is done because there'll be waves, radio waves, that will connect from your laptop to your router when you have this working. As I said, I'm not going to do the lab, but I've already gave away some of the stumbling blocks. But it's the first lab, so. But so that is. Any questions? What?
I'm on the first part of the router. It says secret network plus. Does that mean, is that supposed to mean for the password?
That's the shared secret.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There it is. I was looking on there. I was like,
What's that?
I see that
You gotta
shit.
get to that lab.
To get to the lab,
Is it?
it's in week 6.
Oh, okay.
Week 6, download the PKZ file. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. All right. All right. All right. Well, I'm gonna leave you to the